We have to start with your relationship with the president, of course. You only lasted 11 days as the White House communications director back in 2017. What happened?
Well, I mean, I did work for him for a year prior to that, and I was on the executive transition team. But I think you guys know what happened. It was a well-documented mistake. I trusted a reporter who was a family friend. The His dad had gone back with my dad in the construction community on Long Island for 50 years, and I said a off-color remark to him, which he recorded, unfortunately, and he ran to CNN. And I said to him, "Hey, if you do that, you're going to get me fired." And of course, he did that, and I got fired. So it was my fault. I don't blame anybody for that. I was right about Steve Bannon, by the way, but I shouldn't have said it the way I said it. But that's life.
How should you have said it, do you think?
Well, I think the truth be told, when you did a clinical assessment, an objective assessment about Steve Bannon, he was a megalomaniacal, egocentric white nationalist, and so very dangerous guy to have in the White House. And so, for me, I think my singular greatest accomplishment thus far in American history was helping to get him out of that White House, and he left shortly after my departure. And I was able to expose a lot of the things that he was doing, not only to the president, but to the country. And so you see him here today. He's obviously under arrest. We'll presume him innocent because of the way the due process works in the law. But that doesn't take away the fact that of my opinion of him, which I think he's a very bad guy.
You spoke of the president there. Did you ever like him as a person?
I got along with President Trump. I mean, he's not well suited to be the president. So you just have to just separate the man from the office of the presidency and the colossal task of the presidency and its responsibility. When we were in New York together, whether we were socializing or at a Yankee baseball game or a charity event, he is a gregarious, could be charming at times, raconteur of a guy. It's just unfortunately that skill set that he has wasn't transferable into the office of the presidency. It got him the office. I mean, there's no question about that. He had great communication skills, and he was able to tap into an anger that the American electorate has about the Washington establishment.
You wrote a book about that, didn't you, back in 2018, Trump, the blue-collar president. How far does he still appeal, do you think, to the blue collar ahead of the 2020 election?
Well, listen, I think he still appeals to them. There's been a vacuum of advocacy for blue collar people in the United States for many decades, and so for whatever reason, the establishment on both sides has neglected them. I think Vice President Biden is a different sort of personality than Secretary Clinton, and he was a man from Scranton, Connecticut. I grew up not too far from where my parents were raised, and so he has that blue collar vibe about him. I think what it will really come down to is a culture war. Ultimately, the president was right. He could shoot people on Fifth Avenue, and there's a very large group of people that are going to stay with him no matter what. So when you see the Liz pendants of different things that he's done as president or things that are coming out that he did prior to the presidency, it's sort of colossal. It's a sort of a meteor strike on him, and yet he's able to stay in there primarily because we're in a great culture war in the country. And there's a large group of white Americans that think that he is their last great white hope.
But his connection with the blue collar segment of American society, he is a multi-billionaire that is very happy to flaunt his wealth. So what is it that helps him connect with that segment of society that you illustrated there?
Well, I did write about that in my book. I was on 71 different campaign stops with him. For whatever reason, the way he got raised by his parents, he was on a lot of construction sites as a kid, and he was able to tap into that angst. I would say my dad, who was a blue collar hourly worker, but he had a good wage. We lived decidedly in the middle class. I would never dishonor my dad's work ethic by telling you that I grew up poor. But that very same job today, he couldn't have afforded his family. The real wages are down 25%. And so the president figured out that there was a group of people that were once economically aspirational as blue collar people, and they have now become economically desperational. And that happened in 35 short years. And he was able to tap into that. Now, unfortunately, the policies that he's put in place have not helped those people. And his mishandling of the pandemic has exacerbated the problem in most of those areas of the country. So there's great irony there as well. And again, you just have to look objectively at what he's done. Between the failure of the healthcare crisis, the dismantling of the economy, we're in the worst recession now since the Great Depression, the bellicosity of his rhetoric, the weakening of our alliances in some of the post-World War II architecture, if you will, that has led to such great peace and prosperity. He shouldn't really be president. You know, we gotta send him to Mar-a-Lago, hopefully in the next 55 or so days.
What about the race protests that we have seen over the last few weeks? What impact do you think that will have coming up to the 3rd of November?
Well, I think it's a two-sided coin. So I think there's one side of the coin where the president's preaching law and order. There's great irony to that because this stuff is happening in Trump's America. So his convention speech was, "I'm here to save you from Donald Trump's America. My name is Donald Trump." So there's a great irony there. But there's a group of people that see him as "quote unquote" law and order, even though there's been lots of malfeasance in his life. And then on the flip side, there is a lot of racial anxiety in our country. There's been a strain in the country for several hundred years, and it's been exacerbated now because we have iPhones and smartphones where we can record things that are happening that look very, very unfair and look like high levels of social injustice. So there's a two-sided coin. If the African American community, the Latino community turn out in high volume, similar to what they did with Barack Obama, and they vote for Joe Biden because he's got about 85% or so of that community, he'll decidedly win the race. But there is again, a struggle. There's a class war going on in the society. There's racial tension going on in the society. And we've even politicized wearing masks, which I think is, we've disavowed levels of scientific fact, which I think is nonsensical. All of that is in the soup here. We'll have to see what happens, but I think the vice president will win this. Vice President Biden will be the 46th president.
What do you say to those who say you're just being bitter because you were fired by the president?
Well, I mean, they're entitled to that opinion, but just look at the record. I was with the president. I got fired. For 2 years, you can find tons of video of me advocating for the president and advocating his policies.
I love the president. I obviously love the country. Look at my life experience here in the country. And so it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to stand here, actually. I think he's got some of the best political instincts in the world and perhaps in history. He's genuinely a wonderful human being.
But once he started separating women from their children at the border and putting the children in cages, disavowing our intelligence community, using racial slurs on his Twitter account, it became impossible. It has very, very little to do with me being fired. And again, for 2 years after my firing, I tried to stay loyal to him and his agenda. But you can't stay, loyalty in life is symmetrical. It's not asymmetrical. You can't stay loyal to lunacy. And so we'll be out there working to see him go back to Mar-a-Lago, and hopefully we can calm things down. He made our country, unfortunately, poorer, weaker, and sicker, and we need to heal that now. And so I feel very responsible, and so I'm going to be in there fighting until November 3rd.
Do you think he's a lunatic?
Well, I know he's a lunatic. I don't have to think that he's a lunatic. Just look at it objectively. Yeah, of course he's a lunatic. I mean, come on. Here's the problem, what we do in our society, because he's in that august office. He's the successor of Eisenhower and Roosevelt and Abraham Lincoln. We have a tendency to attach normalcy to somebody that is very abnormal. And I understand that. I did that in the beginning. I tried to do that even after I got fired. But no, you could look at this objectively and say that the guy is a full-blown lunatic.
One topic, given that the United States is so patriotic, comments that he allegedly made about soldiers killed in action being suckers and losers. How damaging do you think that could be for the president? I'm guessing he thinks it could be very damaging, which is why he's come out so forcefully against those comments.
Well, I think they're damaging, and I think everybody knows that those comments are true. And I think it was very telling yesterday. Jeff Mason asked him, well, why don't you have General Kelly release a statement? He was with you the whole time. Give him permission to release a statement. Obviously, the general's not going to speak without the president's permission. But if you ask him to release a statement, he'll release a statement. And, of course, the president doesn't want that. So I think that was very telling right there. So we all know that it's true what happened.
How do you think that the president might react if he loses on the 3rd of November? Will he take it on the chin?
I think he will. I think ultimately what you find with bullies and cowards like this, he's a keyboard warrior coward. I think he's going to get humiliated at the polls, and I think he'll leave. If it's a super tight race, he may fake a head fake of that he's not going to do that, but he obviously will do that. He's despised by the American military. It's not just the generals, as he was talking about yesterday, but it's deep into the ranks. You can just look at the polling there. The military is decidedly Republican, but he's got more than the majority of them against him if you look at the polling. So he's got nowhere to go. If you want to be an autocrat and you want to hijack a democracy, you better have a good relationship with the military. He's probably the most hated commander in chief in the modern era. So he'll be leaving if he loses. And if he doesn't lose, God help us, because he's a very destructive, very dangerous guy.
He's called you, it got personal, he's called you a nervous, neurotic wreck. Do you regret working for him?
The one that was really hurtful was he called me an unstable nut job. So I think that was the one that really got to me, Kay. I mean, I was very upset about that comment. I mean, listen, I mean, that's his projection. Anything that he's saying about a guy like me or a guy like General Mattis or a guy like Rex Tillerson is a projection, frankly, of how he feels about himself. And so I don't mind when he calls me those things. I wear those as a badge of honor. But if you notice, I don't really call him those things. I just look at it very objectively and say that this is not a person that is fit to be the president of the United States. And so let's move on. And we should be brave enough to fear no man or woman, for that matter, and speak our conscience about what's going on in our society.
And a quick thought about Melania. How influential was she in the White House?
Well, listen, I like her very much. My wife and I like her. I don't like talking about their relationship. I do think she is influential, and she's a nice person, and she's a good mom. And I wish Melania well. He went after my wife on Twitter. I would never do that to his wife. That just shows you the type of lowlife the guy actually is.
I wasn't aware of that. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about what happened?
No, it's fine. I mean, you could find it on Twitter. My point is that, like, I'm not Ted Cruz. You're not going to go after my family members without me putting up a fight. My point is, though, I would never do that to Melania Trump or any of his family members.